First of all, Bill Kristol, welcome back to the program. Great to see you there.
Great to see you again.
Reportedly, Donald Trump this weekend is going to declare himself to be the presumptive Republican presidential nominee for 2024. Mitt Romney, no friend of Donald Trump, says if he runs, he gets the nomination. Do you agree?
It's a long way off, and politics has a way of surprising one. But I do think the big story of the last 3 months here in the U.S. has been that Trump has not faded. You would have thought he might after losing. You would have thought he might after January 6th and the assault on the Capitol, and then he was impeached for that. But it's amazing the hold he still has on about 3/4 of the Republican Party. So for now, at least, I'm afraid it's Trump's party.
What is making that such an indelible hold still on Republicans? Is it simply down to 74 and a bit million voters? Or is there some kind of willingness amongst those in power to keep him at the top of the party?
I mean, some of both. One can't discount 74 million voters. They did pretty well in the 2020 elections, even though Trump lost. They picked up House seats. The Senate's 50-50. So if you're a Republican, you feel that the Trump years were kind of rocky. He's a little crazy, it was a little bit, they could do without some of the excitement, but they don't feel like a party in retreat. They feel like a party that's poised to probably pick up the House in the 2022 midterm elections with a decent chance to win the presidency back in 2024. Maybe most of them probably wouldn't prefer Trump himself, but someone who's a sort of slightly kinder, more disciplined version of Trump. But I do think people like me who are anti-Trump and my friends, and especially the liberal media, frankly, all kind of assume, those Republicans, they're in terrible disarray. Look at the fights they're having. It doesn't feel that way to them. They're looking at the Biden administration, figuring there'll be plenty of opportunities to attack the Biden administration. They just need to kind of hold it together. And what that means for them is keeping Trump and his supporters on board, keeping Trump skeptical types kind of on board by signaling that they're not going to go quite as far as Trump, and just trying to kind of hold that band together. So there's been no repudiation of Trump. For people like me who are anti-Trump, that was the thing we were looking for and hoping for, a clear repudiation of Trump and Trumpism. And that hasn't happened.
The notion of Trumpism is interesting, the extent to which that now exists, whether Trump runs or not, and that kind of Trump 2.0s are going to be lining up in 2024, or indeed in the primaries next year for the midterms. Has the party fundamentally changed, or does it snap back if Trump is indicted on tax fraud or is in trouble in Fulton County or something?
Yeah, I don't think it snaps back. I think some people thought it might after November 3rd. More people thought it might after January 6th. The failure to snap back those two times tells me it's pretty deeply embedded. The habits of Trumpism, if you want to call them that, the appeal of the demagoguery, the nativism, the playing on sort of anxieties and resentments against liberals of all kinds, and exaggerating the threat from the left and so forth. That's now pretty deep. I think 4 years of Trump as president, hammering away at it, has made it deeper. And an awful lot of politicians have now, followed that path to victory in primaries and some in general elections. And so they're that's kind of their brand. It's not just Trump's brand anymore. It's become much more, unfortunately, from my point of view, the Republican brand.
Is this a workable realignment for the Republican Party? The voters they are appealing to now and those that they have alienated. Does it get you to majorities in the House? Does it get you to the presidency again?
I think medium long term, it's a losing hand because the Republicans are betting on a shrinking percentage of the electorate. But short term, they didn't do so badly in 2020. And if Biden makes some mistakes, or if just for reasons beyond his control, we get a recession or something goes wrong in foreign policy, it's not out of the question that Trump himself or Trump 2.0 could win in 2024. I think there's too much liberal overconfidence, in a sense, having defeated Trump in 2020, that somehow the whole thing is untenable. I wish it were, but I'm not so sure it is.
Bill, there is, of course, a scenario that Democrats are hoping for. They know that midterms for first-term presidents don't necessarily work out too well, but they also know that once we're through this pandemic, the economy could come roaring back in 2022 in a way that could be very bad for Republicans.
Yeah, I think so. And I think President Biden is focused on the virus, and I think that's the right thing from a policy point of view, but it's also smart politically. He's pushing through this big stimulus, this big economic relief package. Some of the intelligent, even liberal economists are a little worried it might be too big. But I think the Biden administration's attitude is, let's get out of this thing. Let's give ourselves plenty of margin of error. We can always raise taxes a little bit a year or two from now. The Fed can cut down a little bit on the money supply, and so forth. And I think that's a reasonable judgment on the Biden administration's part. So that's kind of the tension. I mean, they're trying to govern successfully. If he does, if we come roaring back, and if people feel that Biden has done a good job on that, then the political dynamics could change. But what worries me is, you would have thought after Trump's incredible mismanagement of the pandemic, the 500,000 deaths, that people would say, well, that's kind of we've tested it. He's not a candidate anymore. It's not an idea. So, TV celebrity, outsider businessman, that'll be an interesting experiment. We had 4 years of Trump. And for me, the fact that 74 million Americans stuck with him on November 3rd is a lesson. And it's not going to, I don't think that just goes away or turns around overnight.
Bill, you've written this week about the idea that some self-identified never-Trump Republicans should think about ways in which it's one thing to help Joe Biden get elected, but now what do we do to help him govern? And you've even suggested there could be virtually a kind of a red dog Democrat wing, former Republicans, if not formally joining the Democratic Party, but to find ways to moderate Joe Biden. How do you see that working, particularly given that he's got, similar pressures coming from the left of the Democratic Party to be going big on things like $15 minimum wage increases?
It's hard to start, in theory, one can imagine a third party, centrist, center-right, someone like me would be very comfortable in it. It's hard to start third parties in America, hard to win the Republican Party back from Trump, which doesn't mean that organizations like mine won't be supporting those Republicans who voted for impeachment and conviction and trying to recruit good candidates and help them in primaries. But it doesn't look that promising on the Republican side. And as you say, precisely because Biden is under pressure from the left, isn't one of the best things you could do if you believe in a more moderate centrist politics, to put pressure, a little bit of counter pressure from the center right. And President Biden personally is pretty centrist. I mean, it seems to me a little weird. Some of my Republican friends, we mostly voted for Biden. I certainly did. Happy to have a centrist Democrat. And then a lot of Republicans have said, okay, well, now there's a centrist Democrat president, but let's just go worry about the Republican Party. Well, there's plenty to worry about there. But for the country's sake, I do think it's important that Biden be a successful president. If we go through these 4 years of Trump, and then we have a Democratic president and things fall apart in various ways, I think you'll spur radicalism, and really irresponsible radicalism, on both the left and the right. So just from the country's point of view, I didn't expect to be saying this. If you had asked me 5 years ago, would I be here really rooting for a Democratic president and trying to push them a little bit to what I think could be sounder policies? But I genuinely just think it's important for the country, and I think it's doable. I think the Democratic Party has recovered a certain amount of, well, it never was that far left, but President Biden won the primary, right? People didn't really expect him to, and he defeated the left.
So, in practical terms, how is that influence or pressure applied? Is it getting behind more moderate Senate candidates next year? What do you anticipate happening there?
Yeah, and there are a lot of practical choices, and I don't think there's one, correct answer on this. Here in Virginia, where I live, right near Washington, D.C., there'll be primaries on both the Republican and Democratic side for governor. Virginia is one of the few states that elects in this off year, in the odd-numbered year. I could vote in the Republican primary. I think the Republicans are likely to nominate a real Trump-type supporter. Or I could vote, and because Virginia doesn't have party registration, you can choose which primary to vote in. I could vote in the Democratic primary and vote for a competent moderate, Terry McAuliffe, who was governor of Virginia before, and he'll be in a tough fight with a Democrat who's considerably to his left. So I think people like me will have this practical choice. Where can we make more difference? Where can we end up with an actual government that is more in accord with what we think is better for, in this case, for Virginia? But, in parallel, the same will be that people will be making those decisions in Senate races and House races, and ultimately in 2024.
Well, Bill Kristol, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks.